Hello everyone and welcome to another interesting video, and today I'd like to continue my discussion from last video and talk about the importance of maintaining our brain function. And it's funny, I was actually thinking about this today after drinking my cup of joe because caffeine has some helpful compounds as well, such as coffee has helpful compounds like caffeine. It has chlorogenic acid, and it has dipterins, and all of those have antioxidants that are good for the brain. So anyways, it's very important to protect your brain, considering that this is literally the sixth leading cause of death in the United States and the fifth leading cause of death in the United States for those over 65. And considering that this disease is probably gonna take the lives of literally, or gonna affect 45 million of the Americans that are living out of the 350 million. So literally around 14% approximately, between 10 and 20% will develop it. And so it's not a rare condition, and there's some races are more affected than others, but it's definitely one to consider. And so it's very important to know the type of things that you can do to improve your brain function. And we already discussed a few of those things, such as keeping a molecule called homocysteine levels in check. And this molecule has been tied to inflammation, which we know is linked to brain dysfunction. And also it's linked to type 3 Alzheimer's, which is, type 2 Alzheimer's, which is linked to the atrophic support, right? The brain doesn't receive the molecules that it needs to function properly. So homocysteine can do that too. And so taking B vitamins, specifically the active forms of B vitamins, can help with that. I'm talking about, taking the B6, the B9, and the B12 vitamins. All of those are gonna help greatly to keep homocysteine levels in check, around less than 6 or less than 7, I believe, micromolars. So that's the level that you want to be at. But there are a lot of other tests that you also want to look at, and we already looked at a few of those, and some of those are reducing levels of insulin. So you know how insulin can high levels can cause insulin sensitivity, which can cause metabolic problems, fatty liver disease, and all other issues. And so we definitely want to keep insulin levels in check. And specifically, what we want to do is we want to have a fasting insulin of less than 4.5, and that's a pretty healthy number. And then for glucose, we want to keep our fasting glucose under 90, so from 70 to 90, preferably under 70. And then the hemoglobin A1C, which is a monthly measure of how glycosylated your hemoglobin is, that should be somewhere between, should be less than 5.6. And so these are some simple blood tests that you can do to test for insulin sensitivity. There's also something called the A over G ratio. So that's another important measure to consider. So let me just find my notes on this. But this is another important test, and A stands for albumin, which is a protein in the blood. And then let me just look at this here, just so I can get the numbers right. Let me just see here. So A stands for albumin, and albumin is needed to clean out the beta amyloid and all the other toxic substances. So you can imagine it's actually a very important molecule, and it's very important. We need to keep it at a good level. And then G stands for globulin, and globulin includes all of the antibodies that we have. And if this number is high, it means we have an autoimmune condition, an autoimmune problem. So we want to keep that A over G ratio somewhere above or equal to 1.8. And we want to have the albumin level above 4.5. So we want the albumin to be higher than the globulin. That means that you're cleaning up the trash more than generating an inflammatory response on foreign invaders, for example. So that's a good measure to have. Another one that's good to look at is omega-6, omega-3 ratio, and that should be between 0.5 to 3. Omega-6s are more inflammatory, and so you want to keep that ratio lower. The lower, the better, but not too low. You don't want to go below 0.5 because that can actually have negative consequences as well. But it's very rare that you'll see people having below 0.5. Usually people have gastronomically high numbers, which is terrible because right now we have these omega-6 oils everywhere, like soybean oil, and it's just everywhere. And that's terrible for us. It's highly inflammatory. In fact, we want to consume more omega-3 oils, found in foods like flax seeds and hemp seeds and those guys. And those are anti-inflammatory, right? Fish oil, fish, stuff like that. So keeping that ratio low is good. I talked about fasting insulin, homocysteine, B vitamins, and then there's the body mass index. So keeping it between 18 to 25. A body mass index above 26 increases the likelihood of type 2 diabetes, which is, of course, increases the risk for Alzheimer's as well. And also keeping the waist circumference less than 35 inches for men and less than 40 inches for women for the same reason. And then LDL, looking at your cholesterol. I did a video about the cholesterol before, and you do want to keep the oxidized cholesterol less than 60 and the small dense cholesterol less than 20, which is 20% of the total LDL particles. And then you also want to keep triglyceride levels less than 150 and the HDL levels above 50 or even above 60 preferably. And then glutathione is another very important molecule, and you want to keep that between around 5 to 5.5. Glutathione is like a molecule that literally cleans up the debris in the body, the oxidative stress and the free radicals, and that's really, really important. So you want to make sure that you're consuming foods high in glutathione. So that's really important, and that includes your broccoli, sprouts. Yes, make sure you eat them, or any other cruciferous vegetables, etc. Greens are very high in glutathione, and that's very good for detox and scavenging those free radicals to completely quench them, right? To eliminate them from our bodies. And then thiamine is also very important for memory and for cognitive performance. That's vitamin B1, and you want to keep that between 100 to 150 as well. That's another important one. We talked about B6, B9, and B12 to keep homocysteine levels low, and then there's thiamine B1, which is also very important. Vitamin D is another important one, and that's important. You can get that from sunlight, and it's actually made from cholesterol, and sunlight helps the conversion of the cholesterol to the vitamin D, which provides neuronal support, trophic support to the neurons so they function well. So get your sunlight exposure, that's very important. And then there's a bunch of hormones which are important for trophic support as well, like estradiol, which is like the estrogen in females, and that's literally has been shown that people who have women had their breasts removed literally increase their risk for Alzheimer's like almost double. It's crazy. So that's a very important molecule to have, and progesterone as well, right? In fact, we want to keep the progesterone to estradiol ratio appropriate, and there is a number for that ratio, because it turns out if your progesterone to estradiol level is too low, that can cause brain fog and memory issues, and you definitely don't want that to happen. And so ideally we would keep that ratio adequate or suitable, right? And so the ratio of estradiol to progesterone should be around 10 to 100. So anywhere between 10 and 100, okay? And testosterone in males. So estradiol in females, and then testosterone in males. You want to keep that between 500 to 1,000, or the free testosterone should be between 6.5 and 15, right? Again, these are numbers So that's one, so to help you out when you do a blood test, so that you know where you are. And then mercury levels should be, below 5. Lead should be below 2. Arsenic should be below 7, and cadmium should be below 2.5. These are like your heavy metals. And there's some tests like quicksilver, the tri test. You can determine where you are there. But these are the numbers from the quicksilver test. For mercury, you should have less than 5, lead less than 2, arsenic less than 7, and cadmium less than 2.5. Copper and zinc, other important minerals. And copper and zinc are also very important, and these guys should be maintained around even, right? Because when you take high amounts of copper, that can cause a deficiency in zinc. And so zinc is very, very important for many reasons. And so when we have a very high copper but a low zinc level, that's not too good. Zinc has a lot of benefits for our body, such as reducing toxicity of metals, reducing oxidative stress, cleaning out debris, improving insulin signaling. And so that's very important for sure. Then and also we want to look at inflammatory molecules and to see if our immune system is overactive, especially our innate immune system, right? And there's also some various tests that you can also be doing, such as brain HQ and Lumosity and Cognizant, and even neuro tracking, which looks at novelty, which I will talk about in more detail in future videos. And then there's also tests on imaging, MRI with volumetrics, where you can literally determine the size of different brain regions, and then you can analyze it with something like NeuroReader and NeuroQuant. Like NeuroReader can literally analyze like 39 different brain regions in the brain, specifically their volume or their size, to see if you have atrophy in any brain region. That's pretty cool. And then your sleep. We talked about the AHI, right? And what happens if you have sleep apnea, you stop breathing, and how that can affect your sleep quality, and the risk factors such as snoring, etc. And then testing your microbiome is very important, because pathogens in our gut or even in the nose and even in the oral spaces, like in the mouth, can be problematic in the brain, because they can cross the blood-brain barriers. Even a sinus infection from mold toxicity, for example, can end up in the brain, right? So that can also cause the type 3, the toxic form of Alzheimer's. So there's all these 3 factors, and yeah, it's problematic for sure. Once I learned how to take a picture and upload it on Facebook, on YouTube, not sure if I know how to do that, but I highly recommend you guys all get a copy of this book. It's called The End of Alzheimer's by Dale Bredesen. And on page 167, 168, and 169, there's a chart of everything you need to get checked for a comprehensive, literally the most comprehensive brain assessment you can get, to pretty much reduce your risk of getting this disease to pretty much none, and to be able to reverse it and catch it before it gets too late. Pretty much reducing it to no chances of developing it, even if you have the 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene. Guys, this is wonderful information, and this is an amazing book to have. I will leave the picture of all the tests you need to do. Now, the reason why I made this video is not for you to get the tests right now. I highly recommend it. Maybe if some of them you can do if you're about 45, others you can do if you actually have symptoms. But these are some things that are good to know right now for prevention, so that you're able to treat them later. We spoke about taking your B vitamins. We spoke about taking to reduce refined carb consumption. We talked about getting good sleep. And now I mentioned about other things like the importance of taking zinc and other vitamins and minerals. But it's also good to do some of these tests to see if you have symptoms, right? So maybe doing a PET scan to determine your beta amyloid numbers, or checking the volumetrics with an MRI to see if some brain regions begin to atrophy, to determine exactly what type of Alzheimer you have. So this video has been a lot, And that actually is the point, is to show you that it's not simple. I will leave this chart for you guys once I find out how to put it on, and then it'll be easier for you to follow me as I talk about it, because you'll see the numbers. And these are not meant to memorize. These are done after expert research, a lot of studies have been put into it to give you the exact numbers that you need, so that you have them, so that you can get tested, and you can actually do, whether it's the 23andMe, as I talked about in the last video, to check for the ApoE4 status, right, in the future, or if you have symptoms, or whether it is to check your RBC zinc levels, to make sure it's appropriate, to make sure it's between 12 and 14 or whatever, so that you have the numbers, so that you're actually able to implement, so that you have your vitamin D3 numbers accurate, between 50 and 80, right? You have the numbers for you, so that you're able to prevent the disease if you choose to. And if you're young and if you don't have any symptoms, you don't have to do it. But this video, I hope, will be seen by people 20 years down the road, 30 years, and maybe even 50 years, and maybe even in an infinite amount of time, because we literally have now the ability to reverse this condition. And you just have to know how to do it, right? Keeping homocysteine levels low, getting good sleep, right? Reducing refined carbs to make sure you don't get insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, which are all risk factors, amongst all the other ones that this chart outlines, right? Such as all the factors of reducing inflammation, right? Upping your intake of zinc and omega-3s, okay? Those are, and two more that you can add to your list of everyday things that you do. So leave me in the comment section below how fast I spoke in this video, just to show you, right, the comprehensiveness and the complexity of this very difficult disease that's, as Dale Barrison puts it, has 36 different causes to it, and we may even discover a few more as time passes. But we're almost there. And so it's not just one thing, but it may even be up to, who knows, 40 different causes of this condition. And we have to patch them all together. Now, you may not have all 40, you may just have a few. And the way to know is by checking your numbers and to doing these comprehensive tests. Super expensive now, but the prices are coming down in the future. So knowing these numbers is very helpful.